What's going on, guys? I'm Derby Dallas. Welcome back to the driver's seat. My guest today is none other than Noah Sarnes. Noah, for the third time, how are you doing, buddy?
Good.
What have you been up to, man? I seen you at Blizzard Bash Run, and what have you been up to this summer?
Oh, after Blizzard Bash, eventful weekend that was. Came back and uh, hell, I think since Blizzard Bash, I've sold 25, 30 steering columns since. That's basically taken up all my time and bought a pre-ran mod car, but that's all I've really done for the last month and a half since then.
Well, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to be on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Man, how'd you get started in Derby? Everybody's got a story of how they started, whether they watched somebody growing up or they helped somebody. So, what's your story, brother?
Well, when I was freshman, sophomore in high school, a buddy of mine actually did it, and we went out and helped him on his cars because we had nothing better to do. And throughout high school and when I was 19, 20 years old, I tried to get into it, never really succeeded much in it. And I figured out once I was probably 20, you either got to be all in or not at all. You can't try to derby without actually basically making it a lifestyle. And then at that point, once I was, out living by myself and wasn't married at the time,
That
and
changes stuff a little bit.
spent all my money I had on derby car stuff, and I started building compacts, and I felt like I built a decent compact at the time, and ended up getting out of that here, probably 2020, 2021, got into the full-size stuff, and I've really jumped into that quite a bit the last couple of years. One of the first full-size cars I built was actually a duo bone stock car for Webster City, Iowa. Went down there with a box Ford, nothing special, and took it down there and made a hard hit. We got our stick broke for it. They considered it a driver door, and in the long run, it wasn't. After watching the video, and the official will agree with that too. It was a BS call, but is what it is. And then
what's that? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, you're good.
I was just gonna say, what's crazy is that me and you kind of got introduced there at the Webster City Derby. I was there filming my first vlog, and you were running that duo car with Alex Reed, a mutual buddy of ours.
Yep. I actually just watched your video on your vlog on YouTube about that Webster City show when I was waiting for you here.
Surprisingly, that's been one of my best ones that I've put out, and my first one I ever did. Everything else has kind of been subpar to that. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, man. Keep going.
Oh, well, after that Webster City Derby, that was a pretty stock car. Factory body bolts, I think we had in it. No lower cradle or anything, just slap a small block in it and ran the stock rear end, and I cold bent it, turned it into a street stock car for Domination Motorsports. Went out there and blew the stock 8.8 to pieces. Just never seen a rear end that bad. And then
so you kind of made your jump from compacts right into what you built at Blizzard Bash kind of quick then, yeah?
Yeah, because that would have been, was that? Yeah, last year we built that duo car last May, so a little over a year ago. And I ran that car all summer. And then I built my first, what I'd consider a good build, was my Capital City Carnage car. I took an old iron down there, and I felt like it was a decent car. My motor wouldn't run worth a heck, but is what it is again.
Hey, man, as long as you're out in the arena, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, and I actually, that would have been my first big show running Carnage down there. I drew a fairly hard heat. There was pretty good drivers out there. One of them actually ended up being one of my teammates on the Blizzard Bash team. Made it straight out of the heat to the feature, so that was something to be proud of, being first time down in Topeka, and that was my first old iron car I built.
So going back, you said you got started in the compacts, and we haven't really had anybody on the show that started in compacts or really is derby to compact at all. Everybody I've talked to, they're really all full-size people. What do you like better, the compacts or the full size?
Honestly, the full size. Uh, there's nothing better than having a built motor ripping around out there. But a good thing about compacts is they're cheap. They are.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple Blizzard Bash cars from this year that were for sale on Facebook. You can buy a turnkey with a cradle and everything, a well-built car for less than 10 grand.
Really?
Yeah, you can't. And in a full size, some guys that won't even touch their motor.
Yeah.
I'm not like that, but some guys.
If we had some more compact shows around here, I might get into one. We have a few, but still, the full size classes, they're the ones that are always paying the most, and they're just, it's easier to find a car and with
Hmm.
people up here. So you always hear the comparison between the two, that compacts, they're a lot more heavy hitting, a lot harder hitting. What would you say?
Honestly, I would agree that the compacts do hit hard. I personally this year I ran a minivan this summer, ran it at a couple shows. Running down and on that track in Topeka, and I've ran a couple good sized shows around here. I ran that minivan this summer. I've never been hit so hard. I I was more scared to get in that minivan than I was pulling out on that track in Topeka. Those little mommy missiles will fly across the track and they don't care.
That's nuts, man. I've only ever seen one minivan heat, but and there were a lot of hard hits.
Yeah.
And you don't expect it to either.
No, and the compacts are basically the same way. Being a front wheel drive car, you can get up and go pretty quick in one of them front wheel drives, whether it's a W body or whatever you choose. I ran one at a show in Chamberlain, South Dakota last year. It was actually what we call a hobo car. Is basically nothing done to it.
Like the old school style of derby.
Essentially, I was allowed skid tires and a full cage and a tubing bumper. And I went to this show, and there was one compact that showed up, and ended up I got the first place in the compact, and I got the Mad Dog payout in the compacts. And I went there to put on a show, so I actually ran my compact with the light weld full size cars, and I took home first place in Mad Dog in a compact with the full size cars. And I went out there, and they thought they were going to take me out right away, but I think they underestimated the speed of those front wheel drive cars.
Well, and I mean, one thing I've been taught is they want everybody tells me aim for the tires, so trying to break an axle or something. Mm-hmm. Those front wheel drive cars, you can beat the rear end tires off of them all night long, and they're still going to be able to keep going because everything's all up front.
Absolutely, but then again, you can look at it the other way too. You take a bad shot to a front tire, you could lose an axle, you could lose a strut, you could lose steering. Compared to in a full size car, all you're going to lose is maybe a ball joint or tie rod or something like that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Going back, you were talking about your Blizzard Bash car, which was a pretty decent built car. I mean, you guys were in limited weld. You took it there, and it looked like it was pretty stout. But you didn't get to pull onto the track, man. What happened there?
Yeah, so the rules stated on a Ford, you can cut the front of the frame off flush with the front edge of that body mount that's on that tab that's on the frame. And I don't know how rules in other states are, but around here, most of them state you can cut the frame to the center of that front body mount hole. And I cut my frame, that hole on the frame is on that tab is probably 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches around. I cut it far enough forward so that I could still slide my 1-inch all thread through that hole. So essentially I'm 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch shorter than what they wanted. And they actually teched my whole car. And as they were putting it down, Kenny noticed that it was too short, which I get. That was 100% my fault. It was. I didn't read the rules good enough. I won't lie to anybody about that. That was 100% my fault. The thing that got me was I offered to cut an inch off of my bumper bracket because essentially it'd be further back on the frame. Didn't want that. I offered to cut my whole bumper off of my car and put a 1/2 inch plate between the bumper and the frame, essentially, sticking it out further, and cut my bumper bracket off. And nobody wants to cut their bumper off of their car at all.
Yeah, no.
They wouldn't allow me to fix it at all. I think, in my mindset, if somebody cut their bumper off and cut the bumper bracket down, that should resolve that problem. And they weren't allowing me to fix it all. And actually, you and I were standing there, staying near every tech walked past that car, going to eat lunch, and they all looked at it, including Austin Johnson. Austin said it was okay, and he actually pulled Kenny aside later on and asked Kenny why my car couldn't run, and Kenny just wasn't willing to work with me at all. And I went after, it is what it is. I was done at that point. I went out into the pit area and I looked at a total of 5 other cars, people I knew, and every single one of them was cut exactly the same way mine was cut, some actually worse. And I went back up and I talked to Tim Clark, actually, and I said, what's the deal with this? You guys didn't allow me to fix, but I look at all these other cars and they're just like mine. And he said, well, you don't have to tell me their names, but what are their roof sign numbers? And I said, you're missing the point here. I'm not throwing these guys under the bus. I'm trying to say that either you guys have a problem against me, or one way or another, you're not teching as straight as you could be.
Yeah.
And basically just told me to go fuck myself, essentially. And
I was walking around talking to some people, and I want to say I got told there was like 11 other limited welds that also got loaded for that same issue. And I was go ahead.
There was, what I was told, and given this is all just hearsay, there was, I know of 2 mod cars, whether they're national or qualifying, that got loaded because of that, and I know of 6 or 7 limited weld cars that got loaded because of that. There was another team that got loaded for other reasons, but that's their business, I guess. But I know of at least 8 or 9 that were loaded just for being too short, whether it was 1/4 inch or whether it was an inch. Kenny said mine was one of the closer ones, but he said, if he lets me get away with it, then the next guy that's 3/4 of an inch too short is going to try to get away with it too, which I understand.
Yeah, I was talking to Will Steinbach about it at Blizzard Bash, and he said, because he's a promoter too, and he said, as a promoter, you got to figure out where to draw that line in the sand out on what you're going to allow and what you won't allow, and he goes, it just sucks that that's where they decided to draw the line at. And I can see that, man, loading something because it's 1/4 to an inch too short. That's being real nitpicky on some stuff.
And, the thing that gets me to, if I would have cut an inch off the frame, I get it. I do. But there's guys that put that bumper bracket on the side of their frame. I put mine on the top on this particular build. But if you put it on the side of the frame, you have to cut that tab off anyway. Who's to say that the guys that put the bumper bracket on the side of the frame didn't slide that tab back a 1/2 inch or whatever it might be? Because you'd never know. So
I put my bumper bracket plates on the side of the frame, and I'm neither confirming nor denying that tab has ever been moved slightly backwards.
Exactly. And yet, like I said, if I was an inch short, I get it. But with how close I was, I had enough cutting to do as is, because there was a lot of things that were very unclear.
They were grilling everybody on stuff like that, though, too. I mean, everybody had like a full sheet of paper to cut.
Well, mine was pretty big, but I'm not going to say that's what it takes to build a competitive car, but in my mind, with the time I had, I started on my car in early summer, so why not do some of that stuff see if there is some stuff that maybe they're okay with or they will allow that aren't in the rules.
Just reading the rules like everybody else, man. Looking for a gray area that might give you a little bit of an advantage. Seeing if it works.
Yep.
That's no different than what anybody else does.
Yep.
But you're not the first person that I've talked to that ran into issues with it. And my brother at Capital Carnage, we actually had to cut out his entire roll cage except for his the square part of it, towards the top.
Yep.
We had to cut both of his down bars out and like half of his gas tank. Half is obviously exaggerating, but 6 or 7 inches out of his gas tank protector and all sorts of stuff. And so when you said you were gonna have to do that, I was like, oh crap, we're in for a long night.
Yeah, but the gas tank protector thing at Blizzard Bash, that was a Kenny decision, and almost everybody there cut their gas tank protector, and it was, in my mind, that was BS, because what happened was the rules state you got to be 3 inches, I believe, 3 or 4 inches from the sheet metal on the package tray, and you got to be 6 inches from the roof. And what some guy did was he stuck his gas tank protector essentially out the back window. Well, he was 3 inches away from sheet metal and he was 6 inches from the roof. So technically, he didn't break any rules there. And they didn't like that. So what they were doing was you could be angled back until the height of your factory speaker deck. And in mine was gone. I cut mine out. So you could be angled back till the factory speaker deck. And then from that point up, you had to be vertical. So they wanted me to take my gas tank protector and essentially cut it in half and then fold half of it vertical.
Weld it back together.
Yeah, which, you got to cut all your gussets out that go to your halo. And and mine wasn't extreme at all. Mine was just like everyone else's.
Well, I've talked with a few people, about the way Blizzard Bash and some of the other, I guess Tim Clark shows or Smash It shows have been ran. And honestly, it doesn't matter which derby you go to, whether it's Blizzard Bash or like the upcoming Gold Rush or all the way down to your small county fair shows. You're going to run into stuff you don't agree with, especially in the tech line that, well, I didn't do what these guys did, so you should let me do this, Like, it doesn't matter what show you're at. You're going to get pissed off. Someone's going to get pissed off about something, not you specifically, but...
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So I think everybody, going after Smash It on Facebook a little bit, like they did this year, was a little uncalled for, because, they're going to do the same thing at these smaller shows. And you never really heard about any of the good things that the show brought, like raising all that money for that little kid and stuff. That should have been talked about more than what people disagreed with, maybe. But speaking of Smash It and Gold Rush, Sam Williams just announced a couple months ago the Gold Rush show up in South Dakota, Rapid City.
Yep,
what are your thoughts on that, man?
I would really like to try and get a spot for the. I think they're considering it mods. They're not having, from the video I watched anyway, they're not having limited weld. They're having national and qualifying teams, bone stock teams, compact teams, and I believe there's that national single event where you qualify at other shows, which I think is really cool. I personally think it's going to end up being a bag fest.
I do like the aspect of the making it a full team show all the way around. Besides that one class, that national modified class, but having everything else a team show, I think, is a pretty good idea. That's something I think is pretty cool.
And I think his rules, from what I've heard, are going to be a little bit more uniform to everybody. By the sounds of it, it's going to be basically mods. You're allowed a full cradle tranny brace. You're allowed a firewall. You're allowed A-arm forward plates, just like any other mod. But it sounds like you're not going to be allowed aftermarket spindles. You're going to have to run some sort of a stock spindle. I wouldn't assume he's going to allow truck spindles of any sort, which I don't know if that's good or bad. Saves people a lot of money.
Yeah. But on those hard tracks like that, man, those aftermarket steering parts and spindles and stuff, those come in handy.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think, if you take a tire shot with say you got a 80s Ford spindle, you might bend the spindle, but you take a nasty shot with a aftermarket, say a ski spindle, you're just gonna rip a ball joint out or bust a tie rod end or rip steering box off or some sort. So either way, I think there's damage that's going to be done. So
Yeah.
but if everyone on,
Well,
on the track's got the same build, then it'll be fair.
Yeah, kind of ballsy for the guy to make it the week before Blizzard Bash, though.
Oh, he knew what he was doing.
That's a ballsy move in my opinion. Which Sam, he's the original founder of Blizzard Bash, and he's got the name behind him and everything. But I think what's really gonna bite him in the ass that nobody's really thinking about is Blizzard Bash has that nostalgia factor. You know what I mean?
Mhm. And
Sam could go ahead.
There is teams that run national and qualifying that have worked to be on that national level that probably don't want to give up as easy as some of these other guys, whether they have a problem with smash it or what have you. But some of those guys say they're not going back to Blizzard Bash. But what are you going to do about the guys that worked so hard to get there, and they're just going to give that up to go start all over in Rapid City?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you might have some guys, want to go run, like you said. Some guys are wanting to go up there, but I think a lot more people that earn their spot on the national bracket of Blizzard Bash will want to stay there.
I think there's going to be a lot of open spots at Blizzard Bash next year.
Oh, for sure.
And there was this year. I think there was maybe 3 qualifying teams that either maybe they didn't fill or didn't show up. There was, I think, a total of 3.
Well, spots open for next year. Then it sounds like.
Yeah, and that honestly, that somebody told me that the next few years, the only people running Blizzard Bash are going to be the people that have never had the opportunity to run before.
Yeah, see,
which
even then,
good for them.
Get the turnout.
Yeah, good for them. That gives maybe some people that don't maybe have the chance to run now or previous years, that gives them the chance to run down there, and they get to say they can, because I think it's something to be able to say that you've ran Blizzard Bash.
Yeah. And before anybody takes what either I or Noah are saying the wrong way, neither one of us are bashing either promoters, okay? We're just both big fans of derbies, and we're giving our points of view. That's the last thing we need is some dickhead on the internet coming for us in the comment section.
Yeah, I don't have anything necessarily against Smash It itself. I've had a couple run-ins with Tim Clark himself, but that doesn't mean I don't like Smash It. There's a lot of good guys that work for Smash It. I kept talking about Kenny. I get along with Kenny. He's got to be fair, or else people are going to try to get away with stuff. So Tim Clark, that's a different story. But Smash It itself, I don't necessarily have a problem with.
Well, being a promoter or a inspector for that matter has probably got to be one of the hardest things to do in this sport, because you're either A, going to make somebody happy and piss someone else off, or vice versa. And it's like they say, if one of the listeners don't like it, they can go out and try it themselves and, see how they like it.
Mm-hmm.
But going back on all that, there's been a lot of shows that a lot of people said would take, Blizzard Bash's, their car count and stuff like that. Stern Dirt had the Sin City Showdown or the Casino Royale in Las Vegas, which I honestly was a huge fan of. I thought it was cool seeing a derby arena in downtown Vegas.
Absolutely.
Or Bash for Cash is a Smash It show, but
yeah.
You just have these other big shows that are coming out or have came out that everyone, they're gonna give Bash a run for its money, and Bash is still around.
Well, Sam essentially did the same thing with Capital City Carnage. and he's got that show in Illinois. Forget, is it Peoria maybe?
Yeah, Peoria, Illinois, and it's Whiskey City Showdown.
Yeah, yeah, that one. And he set it up last year, and I know, for example, like Caddy Nation guys, they normally always run Carnage and Limited Love, and they actually didn't last year. They ran Sam's show in Illinois, and he set it up last year, being like 5 heats, 5 one and done heats of 10 or 15 cars, whatever it was. And now, Capital City Carnage this year, or this in 2023, is almost set up the same way. So,
hey man, when you got a good idea or somebody else has a good idea, jump on it, you know?
yeah. And but that's how it's got to be. I mean, if Sam didn't have new ideas, he wouldn't have anyone show up at his show. You got to do something different.
And same for Bash or all these other guys. If you don't have new ideas, you're just gonna get swept under the rug, and nobody's gonna ever think about you again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyways, man, sorry to dive into all that stuff.
Oh, doesn't bother me.
What do you think about these Gladiators of Steel stuff they got going?
I haven't
TV show and everything.
I actually haven't looked into that a whole lot. I've seen it on Facebook here and there, but that's honestly about all I know about it. I haven't watched it. Is there like episodes or something on now already, or?
They haven't released any episodes yet. I pre-ordered it because I don't do anything in my free time but watch Derby stuff. So I think it's dropping on December 21st.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. I haven't. I've seen it a while back. I think I watched like almost like a preview of it. Yeah. But that's all I've seen about it.
I think that's also a good thing. Gumby and those guys, I think, made a smart decision, because people like watching Derby stuff. Everybody tunes into Track Shot Live or Derby Nation. Give us a weekly TV show or something to watch. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and I think it would be if they do it right, I think it could be a big hit.
Yeah. Well, moving on, man. You started in compacts. You're in, full-sized cars now. What are you thinking about building over this next year? Not
a whole lot, actually. I've got a show coming up, actually Webster City. I had a spot for last year, and I had an 03 actually built for it. And they ended up canceling. It got rained out, and they offered me my money back for my spot, and I said I'll just, take a spot next year. I didn't really have a plan with who I was running it with, but now my wife says she wants to steer it. She said she wanted to run the pedals, but that ain't happening yet. So I got a 63 Galaxy that I was going to build for that. It's basically stock rules. Can't do a whole lot to them. And I think some of them old Fords can actually be pretty tough cars if built right.
Yeah.
I feel like it should maybe take on what everyone else builds for a stock show, whether it's a Vic or a metric GM. So.
I mean, there's only one way to find out too.
Yeah, and it was $350. So.
Hey man, that's worth it then.
Yeah, and it's already stripped. Best part.
Has your wife ever driven in a Derby before?
No, she's not.
Man, I've got my wife convinced to be in one, but she wants to do a duo car too, so that she can have somebody in there with her in case something goes wrong. So look here, honey, the 99% of the time when something goes wrong in my car, I don't know what the hell it is. I just start fucking with shit.
Yeah.
Freaking, is the fuel pump running? Batteries connected? It's just, you run through it.
And I think if I were to let her run that car later on by herself, because I'm going to build it a little bit lighter to the rules so that I can run it more locally as a bone stock car. And I might switch the pedals back over so she can run it herself, or I can, or whoever. But I think having a good setup goes a long ways.
Oh yeah.
You spend the money on some good parts, you're probably not going to have some of those little things go wrong that she might not know what to do.
And that's something that not a lot of people understand about Derby either. Is that most of the time the real expensive parts you can move from car to car to car,
Yep.
and but we're not all we just don't go out there and waste money completely. I mean, we do waste a little bit of money, but at least the important stuff we can switch over. Do you have any worries about getting out there with her or anything?
I think the only worry I have is finding a good divorce attorney afterwards. But other than that, that's probably it. Or an ambulance. She might beat me up. I don't know.
Hopefully, you're in the basement having this conversation with me and not
Yeah, yeah.
upstairs.
She's upstairs. So, when I was running compacts, I had tons of steering problems. Had another brand, the steering column in the car. I won't name the brand, but ended up modifying that one a little bit by putting the Heim joints in a piece of square tube, and I thought that was just the cat's ass. Thought that was awesome, and it worked out pretty well. I had a couple local guys run them, and then one day I thought about making a mount to bolt the steering column to the firewall, essentially where the factory column mounts in a W body car. And once I made that, tons of people started buying them. That's actually what started the whole thing, was my bolt-in W-body steering columns. They were, honestly, looking back now at the quality I build now compared to then, they were shit. And
Only allowed to say that because it's your own product.
yeah. And I've looked back at some. I seen one for sale on Facebook a couple months ago, and they ripped my stickers off of it and didn't say what brand it was, but I clearly knew I made it, and it looked terrible, but it was still working.
He's on to you. Sorry, I was just calling him out, man. I didn't want to interrupt you.
And then I had a couple local guys want them for full size cars, and they were almost a custom built type of thing because I didn't really know what I was doing. And then I had a buddy run one at a duo car in Blizzard Bash. Still in the car to this day, ran it a few more times. Put a couple in some other cars, and the biggest thing that really got me going in the full size was I put one in a qualifying car. Brandon Kilcoyne was the guy's name. He ran an old iron in the qualifying bracket in Blizzard Bash in 2021, and the car went straight up A-arms forward. And that is probably the worst thing that can happen to a steering column, because it shoves that U-joint at basically a 90-degree angle right on top of the engine cross member, and he was still steering all night long. And I got a bunch of sales off of that alone. And then I really started upping the quality of my steering columns because I knew I could sell them. And I do a few things different than some other guys do. And now I really take the time to make them look good, and I take pride in it now. And I think that's partially why I sell as many as I do, because the end of that square tube where I put them welds, I use one whole grinder wheel, a flap disc, per steering column. Just because once they start to wear out, they don't do as good of a job.
No wonder they're so damn expensive.
So I use just the edge of that grinder wheel, and they start to wear out, and they don't do as good of a job, so I throw it away. So
doesn't sound very cost efficient, man.
Well, that's why the price is what it is. But to be honest, nothing against anyone else, but I've looked at some other steering column prices, and they're pretty similar to mine.
Yeah.
And they, mine are basically welded in your car, whereas a lot of guys just sell two Heim joints that you have to somehow mock up a piece of angle iron or a tube or flat strap with two holes in it to bolt that steering column to it. And I personally, I know how to set a steering column up in a car so that you don't bend it. And I think that's why people bend their 3/4 inch steering columns, because they put that Heim joint too far up and they leave too much of that 3/4 inch shaft exposed, and it'll just bend it. And that's, personally, I think a 1 inch steering column is unnecessary. way overpriced for what they are. And if you have a 3/4 inch steering column set up right, I think it'll work just as
So is
good.
that why? Is that why you have the square tubing towards the top of it, is so that people can weld them down?
Yeah, that's so that square tube. There is not a single bit of that 3/4 inch shaft exposed other than that where the steering wheel is, because that essentially that gives that 3/4 inch shaft nowhere to bend other than inside that tube. Whereas if it bends in that tube, it's only gonna hit the wall of the square tube, and technically you should still be able to wheel that car around. It'll be bent, but you still should. And
Does it not worry you that people might run into issues with that?
I warranty my stuff,
I
so
know. I need to write that down. I've bought one.
to a certain extent, they all come with for a full size, other unless you're on like an old iron caddy or an O3. They all come with 16-inch slide pieces. So if you set them up right, I always tell people 2 inches in, that gives you a total of 14 inches that car can bend. And I have had two in bone stock cars, and they have bent awful, terrible, and there's still a couple inches of slide left. So if you set them up right, technically you should have all the slide you're going to need.
So, just started this because you got tired of dealing with other people's stuff and said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go build my own."
That's kind of what started it, yeah, in them compacts. And then I had that bolt-in W body setup that just took off. And then I had them couple local guys that wanted them, and I realized I could actually make money off of them. And I don't know what I'm at right now, but from Blizzard Bash last year until like July or August of this year, I sold like 120 steering columns, and I took
Damn good.
I think I took 27 or 28 of them down to Blizzard Bash with me that were pre-sold, and I've sold 25 or 26 in the since Blizzard Bash because I had a Black Friday sale.
And you're taking more to a Cornhusker, right? This
Yeah,
New
Cornhusker
Year's.
Chaos over New Year's in Kearney, Nebraska. I, I'm probably gonna end up taking 15 to 18 of them. Kind of depends where I'm at for parts. Just I know I've got a couple pre-orders, and that Will Steinbeck did a raffle, pre-built cars, and raffled
Yeah.
one of my columns off, and I got it. The kid that won one of my columns, I'm delivering it there for him. So I got to
Hell
build
yeah.
3.
You also entered that raffle too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, well, because Will's got that one going on right now where he's raffling off that wagon, which is a hell of a deal. If anybody doesn't know what they're looking at on it, I mean, that car itself is probably $5,000, and I think it's $200 a spot, which is kind of a lot if you lose your money. Which I think that's part of the reason it's not full. But
my favorite
you get a
thing to
built
tell
car for
people,
$200. That's a good deal.
yeah, that's can't beat that. But my favorite thing to tell people is how much cars cost before we derby them, like some of these old irons, like wagons or caddies, stuff like that. Especially in these where I'm from down in Texas, we can get cars. I'm just gonna say that we can get cars, and up north, everybody's like, "Oh dang, how'd you get that car?"
Yeah, and they're clean.
Yeah, and they're like, "Well, what would you buy it for?" And I'm like, "I can't disclose that information.
Yeah.
It'll put tiny old iron out of business." I was gonna say, I think we've covered pretty much everything that's going on in the fucking today's derby world.
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
And we covered how you got into derby and what got you started in it pretty good. Everybody else I've asked that question to have been in it for like 20 years. And so when you were like, "Yeah, I didn't get started till I was like 20," it was fairly recent. I'll ask you this again. since I tell everybody this before we end the show and stuff. I ask people this in case someone watches it that's a fan of you or wants to meet you or whatever, go watch you. Besides Webster City, do you have any shows that you plan on going to run? I know you got a freshly built Blizzard Bash Limited weld that's probably itching to get out of the garage.
It's gonna sit there actually. I've pulled all my parts out of my Blizzard Bash car. I don't have a plan for it. I don't personally want to run that car at a county fair show. I feel like I've got too much invested into it just to run it locally. Whether it sits for 2 years and I can run it at maybe a bigger show, maybe say Sam's show, maybe later on, or I'm not sure. But I got a pre-ran mod car, Blizzard Bash mod, that I'm probably gonna run throughout the summer. Probably, I'm kind of hoping if that Black Hills Beatdown's got mods again, they did last year, I'd like to take it up there. Basically, anywhere I go to vend, because I hate driving like Rapid City, South Dakota is 6 hours. I hate driving all the way up there just to sell some steering columns. I'd like to haul a car with me and maybe come home with some more money. Maybe not. Maybe blow a bunch of money. I don't know. You never know how it'll go.
Be on the lookout then, because my aunt lives up in Rapid City, and we've been meaning to go up there and watch a derby or two and hang out with her as well. So if you end up picking it up that way, let me know.
Yeah, that show in I think it's June, that Black Hills Beatdown. That's an awesome show. I think it's like $10,000 Mad Dog or something.
I was gonna say from what I've seen on Facebook, they have a pretty good payout too, like for just first, second, and third, and they pay all the way to like 8th or 9th, I think.
Yeah, and it's a fairly lighter set of rules, so the cars actually bend, which I like to see the cars bend a little bit.
Who doesn't like to see the cars bend, man? That's the best part, is when you can hear the metal crunch and see the damage being done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that there's probably a lot of money getting hurt out there, but it ain't hurting me. So.
So you got for the SSW, you got your vending, you got Cornhusker, Black Hills Beatdown. Anywhere else you plan on vending at?
No, not that I can think of. We thought about going to Capital City Carnage, but I don't know if you've ever looked into vendor fees, but they're quite ridiculous.
I don't have anything to vend at the moment, and I thought about making some T-shirts or something and trying to find somewhere to vend.
Not worth it. I know, it's kind of public information, so I can say it. Like that Cornhusker Chaos, that's $600.
Holy shit!
Yeah, and Black Hills Beatdown's $500.
Well, the thing is, though, with your 30,000 fucking steering columns that you're taking to Cornhusker, you'll make that money back in no time.
Well, Cornhusker Chaos is a little bit better deal than, like Rapid City, because I do get, anywhere you go, normally you get 2 free passes, which is essentially a little bit better than a pit pass. You can go anywhere you want. So, that's probably a couple $100 value, maybe not Cornhusker Chaos. Maybe that's only $100 value, but Cornhusker Chaos gives us 2 nights in a hotel. So that's a couple $100. But I've never looked into like Blizzard Bash or Capital City Carnage vendor fees, but I'm sure that they're over $1,000. A
little bit more up there.
Yeah.
I mean, for any of those big shows like that, though, I bet you it's up there.
And I don't think people realize the amount of work it takes to, for me to build, say, 20 steering columns. That's a lot of time, and I added up the parts or the money I'm going to have into all these steering columns that I'm going to take to Cornhusker Chaos. I think it's like $2,500 worth of parts that I'm supposed to just. I can go and sell nothing for all I know. Yeah. So it takes a lot more money than what people think, and I always tell people it takes money to make money. But
okay, guy, now
which it's true.
Like one of those guys.
It's true.
No, it is true. It is true. I mean, I don't make any money off of this stuff, but put in quite a bit just to get it to where it's at now. So I completely understand.
I consider my time worth something too.
Oh yeah.
So it takes a ridiculous amount of time to build that many steering columns.
Well, and if you're selling yourself short if you're not, charging labor or charging for your time, because, that's your personal time. Same with the job.
Yeah.
You want to get paid overtime because that's time you get to spend at home.
Yeah, and that's, you know, when I sponsor people, that's basically me working for free at that point, because it's somebody bigger somebody that sells thousands of dollars worth of parts a week can probably afford to sponsor you. But when I sponsor somebody, that's basically out of my pocket, and I'm more than willing to do it. But
hey, you sponsored my car.
yeah, well, I like doing it.
Brake tool.
Yeah, I forgot about that actually. I enjoy doing it, but I enjoy sponsoring people. I just don't think some people are almost ungrateful with it and don't realize what it takes.
Well, just so you know, I appreciate you for sponsoring the channel, man. You know, you agreed to do it, and you didn't really even know me very well, but hopefully we can make something happen for each other.
Yeah, well, I'll do anything for about anyone, so.
Oh, really?
If I can. Yeah. Yeah. Call me later.
Just might have to. Well, man, I appreciate you for being on the show. I'll try to get all these technical difficulties we had chopped up and put into a video and try to get it out pretty soon.
Yeah.
But like I said, thanks for being on the show, man. And maybe we can get this whole giveaway thing figured out down the line and get some more viewers, get some more people to like your Facebook page, and maybe we can have a surprise set up for the people that, you know, support SSW and Derby Dallas, and we can get something put together. Yeah, man, I appreciate you for being on the show. Thanks for, you know, donating your time, I guess, to be on it and talking through some of this stuff with me. Hopefully we can have you back on sometime.
Yeah, I'm glad I could do it. Glad you had me.
Well, thanks everybody for listening in. This was the Driver's Seat Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you go check out Sarnes Steering Works on Facebook. Give them a follow. Buy a column or 7. And catch you guys later.